He makes Sheldon comics. Yeah, I'll give you a book sometime. Yeah.
Oh.
So he's.
Well, you should have told me he was there. I would have stopped by.
I didn't know you were going. I did tell Andrew, and Andrew's
okay.
going to let me know if he saw him over there.
Well,
so
great.
Yes. My brother's a grown man who makes a living drawing pictures of ducks. I think that's the greatest thing that could ever happen to somebody.
I'm sure the guy who did that with Donald Duck is probably super rich, so you can do
He's
well.
no longer with us, by the
or-
way. That's
oh.
just mean to say about Walt Disney. He might come back because they froze his head, but is that a myth? Did you ever hear about that?
That's a myth. Didn't they freeze that baseball player's head?
Ted Williams.
Ted
they did,
Williams. Yeah.
Right.
But I don't know
He's
if they
from here in San Diego.
I don't know if they did that to Walt, but you can make quite a living. Not just Donald Duck, but you have Huey, Louie, and Dewey.
Oh, are you
You've
gonna
got
do all the
Scrooge,
cartoon ducks?
Scrooge McDuck.
Scrooge McDuck. Yeah.
I'm
Howard?
You have Darkwing Duck. You
Howard,
have Howard
the Duck. Nicely done, Carlo.
Carlo
Look
got
at
a
Carlo slip in.
I
there.
was like,
remember,
I know some-
that one from my childhood.
Yeah, that was George Lucas's best movie.
That was the
best movie he ever made.
very first Marvel Cinematic Universe film. Was
Was it
Howard
really?
the Duck,
And
it's all uphill
I
from
don't
there.
understand why George Lucas doesn't talk about it more. You hardly ever hear him talk about it. It's such a
That and the
great-
Star Wars Holiday Special, they are persona cinemata non grata.
All right, if you want to get in on our conversation, because it is going to be a serious conversation, because we're going to go to Carlo some of the time. It won't all be Trent. You're welcome to call 888-318-7884. What we do when we do these Friday panel shows is we take a look at the news in the world and the condition of the world, and we decide what we want to talk about. And there's a lot out there to talk about. You're welcome to bring your topic, your question, your comment, 888-318-7884. That's going to upset Marie, what I just said, because she's going to be like, well, is it supposed to be a question or Marie's screening on the phones today. So just tell Marie I said whatever you want. Whatever you want, you get it today. 888-318-7884. Okay, so I want to just jump right into the controversial stuff with you two. So Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens was he 90 or 99? He was really up there. He died this week. God rest his soul.
I did read about that.
He was a very long-serving Supreme Court justice. I think he was the third longest. And I bring up John Paul Stevens because he's kind of famous for several things, but in the moral, legal realm, things that might be of interest to us is he became a judicial defender of abortion, and he became a judicial opponent of the death penalty. Quite, I don't want to say strident. What's another word that's not pejorative for strident? Like
Ardent.
Ardent. He was a very ardent opponent of the death penalty. So I thought, well, let's talk about John Paul Stevens and that legacy and all that. Where first of all, anybody want to tell me where we Catholics are right now on abortion and the death penalty? Anybody want to try to just sum up the Catholic position on abortion and the death penalty at the moment? I mean, not that I say at the moment, but these things change not because the eternal deposit of faith changes, but circumstances in the world change, and there's always new moral problems to. All right, neither one of you're both like, why would I want to talk about it?
I'm happy to jump in. Well, I believe that they both involve the direct taking of human life, but the church has historically and even today seen these as two very different takings of human life. The church routinely calls abortion an intrinsic evil. It is something that direct abortion, as what Pope St. John Paul II said in the Gospel of Life, is something that can never be performed and has always been condemned by the church and has been condemned universally for 2,000 years. The death penalty, even when abortion was something that was a part of Greco-Roman society, for example, that's something the church routinely rejected, along with infanticide. The death penalty, however, was something that the church inherited within its social structures as something to maintain the common good. And it was always something, when you read like the writings of the church fathers and the saints, something that it's not something that's wholeheartedly celebrated, but always trying to reconcile. Nothing to celebrate, but something maybe necessary to secure the common good. And so you have an understanding of how the death penalty ought to be applied in societies changing over time, especially even in the Universal Catechism as put forward in 1994. Pope St. John Paul II, the revision of the Catechism based on what Pope St. John Paul II said in the Gospel of Life, saying that the death penalty was at one time necessary to secure the common good, but now the reasons justifying it are rare, if not practically non-existent.
Okay.
So that's what John Paul II said in 1995. And the most recent change came in 2018 when paragraph 2267 of the Catechism was revised, so the death penalty went from being rare, if not practically non-existent in its necessity to use, to being something that was now, they don't use the word impermissible, they use
Inadmissible.
Inadmissible, right. The death penalty is inadmissible. It is something that, given the time and place we live in and our understanding of how legal punishments are carried out, it's something that states ought not resort to.
Anything you need to correct about what he said?
No, amen. 100% right on the target. Yeah, an essential difference between the two, Trent pointed out very well, that you have what we would call in moral philosophy the natural species of an act, right? So you have an act of taking the life of a human being. But in the case of direct abortion, you have the act of taking the life of an innocent human being,
right,
which is intrinsically evil because you're attacking a chief part of the common good. And we're all ordered to the common good, and so to attack a chief part of the common good is intrinsically evil. Whereas in the case of capital punishment, you have an act of taking the life of a guilty human being, right, a criminal, who has taken him or herself away from being that chief part of the common good. And so Aquinas would put forth an argument to try and support and justify why we only those who are in authority, who have care of the common good, to end the life of such an individual in order to protect the common good, as Trent pointed out. And that takes on a different moral species, because you are no longer attacking or taking the life of an innocent human being, but a human being who has acted against the common good in such a severe way that would merit a severe punishment. And so traditionally and throughout all of church history, taking the life of a guilty human being through capital punishment has never been seen as an intrinsic evil. Intrinsically, it's permitted. Now, you can have certain historical conditions, cultural and historical circumstances that could come to be to where to engage in such an act, which in and of itself is permissible. Under certain conditions and circumstances, it could become inadmissible and immoral, not because of the act, but because of the circumstances making it immoral.
So one's absolute,
Yes.
and the other's conditional. And,
Right.
and what the recent popes are saying is the conditions now
They've changed.
say
Correct.
don't do it.
And it's important that we read the letter that Cardinal Ladari put out in order to explain the revision. There are several places in the letter where he points out that in the past, this was a legitimate form of self-defense. In the past, it was used as a way of protecting the common good, which implies that the new revision of the Catechism is not saying it is intrinsically evil.
Yeah.
It's saying, given our conditions, it would be, given our historical circumstances, it would be immoral to employ it. And I think a good example, perhaps, that we could use is, legitimate self-defense, taking the life of an aggressor, right, considered abstractly independent of circumstances, in and of itself can be morally permissible, right?
Yeah.
But let's say, hypothetically, that aggressor is a 9-year-old kid coming at me with a knife, right? Well, if I use lethal means to protect myself against such an aggressor, even though using lethal means to protect myself in and of itself is morally permissible, when you take into consideration that I don't need to be using it in this circumstance,
Right.
to use it would becomes immoral. And I think that's a parallel or an analogy,
To where we are
perhaps,
now.
We can
to where
also-
we can see it with capital punishment.
Yeah, we can also extend an analogy. So Aquinas defends capital punishment, and there is a bit of a little bit of a dispute among Catholic moral theologians
Right.
about the permissibility of capital punishment. Some would say it's still legitimate under certain circumstances. Some say it's always wrong. But when you go back to Aquinas's arguments, he uses an example like, why can you kill somebody just to protect the common good? You say, well, just as mutilating myself is wrong, it wouldn't be wrong if I had a gangrenous limb. And so
Okay.
to cut off the gangrenous limb to save the body would be justified because it's the only way to save the body. Now, suppose, however, I could administer antibiotics and save the person's gangrenous limb, but I decided to amputate it just to teach them a lesson they should wash out their wounds better. I'm going to teach them a lesson here. That would be, of course, wrong because I have the means to treat the person without amputating the limb. Much the same way that today in the world we live in, there are means to protect society without resorting to capital punishment. And what's interesting here, when I did research on this, the only countries that employ capital punishment today are the United States, China, and Muslim theocracies. Most, like the poorest countries in the world, you go to sub-Saharan Africa, almost all of them have abolished the death penalty. And those would be places people say, well, what about these countries like Chad or something like that? Like, well, I mean, they've retained it for extreme circumstances like terrorism, things like that.
Before we go to the break, then let me just ask you this: when the church says the tradition of the church had been to defend, you said the common good, or what was the phrase?
Well, not only to. So you have I said protection of the common good.
Okay.
And what Trent is bringing up is a form of like legitimate self-defense on a societal level, right? And defending the society from a certain criminal. We see in sort of in modernity, in the modern approach, is that the idea of what traditionally has been called retributive justice, right? Bestowing punishment.
Oh,
for
so
the
that justice happens. Yeah, like so.
For the sake of reordering what has been disordered due to the grave crime, right? Traditionally, that was seen as sort of the primary purpose of punishment. And then secondarily, you have the purposes of protecting the common good and protecting society, and then also for the sake of reformation, right? Punishment for the sake of reforming the individual. But what we do see sort of a shift in modern magisterial language, the idea of retributive justice seems to be kind of on the back seat there. And so moral theologians will debate of whether or not that should be at the forefront and the primary purpose in governing whether or not we use capital punishment, or should we be using, can we defend our society in ways other than capital punishment and using that as our guiding principle of whether to have it or not. So that's in the mix there as well.
Okay, so we started this conversation because the news reason that I brought this conversation to you is the death of Justice Stevens,
Right.
Who, as I said, became a judicial defender of abortion and an opponent of the death penalty. So when we come back from the break, I want to ask you about the moral role of a judge in this situation. Can a judge say, well, this is what the law says, I have to rule the way the law says, or are there places in which a judge either has to resign or do something more radical in protest of an unjust law? We'll tackle that when we come back with Karlo Broussard and Trent Horn, our guests for 2 hours of conversations about the goings-on in the world from a Catholic perspective right after this.
Hi, this is Trevor Williams from the Pittsburgh Pirates, and you're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Divine Intimacy Radio.
The greatest joy in my life is helping others to come to know Christ more fully. And there's no better light on this path, the path to deep union with God, than the wisdom of the saints. Talking about this daily on EWTN Radio is one of the great joys of my life.
Divine Intimacy Radio, Sunday, 6:30 a.m., 1:30 p.m., and 11 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Hey, while I got Karlo and Trent here, I want to invite you again because each of them will be a speaker and an everyday participant in the upcoming conference. The conference is 2 months away this September 26th through 29th at the Hyatt Regency La Jolla. It'll be beautiful. It'll be sunny. And the topic will be the early church was the Catholic Church. I'm told now that if you can get that special room rate still for $154 a night. Bishop Caggiano from Bridgeport, Connecticut is still I don't know why I'm saying still like you thought it was going to change, but is our keynote speaker. He'll be there. We'll have a wonderful reception with him. Jimmy's going to call some square dancing. Will you be either of you be square dancing, or are you avoiding the square dancing?
I don't.
What's the question? I don't understand the question.
Are we going to square dance? I might cut a rug, tear up the ballroom floor a little bit. I might promenade.
It's,
Do-si-do.
okay, all right. And Carlo's acting like he doesn't hear me down there. Yeah.
Well, it's not Cajun, man. So it's not like jitterbugging like Cajun music, like in southern Louisiana. You know.
Wait, why don't we have?
I don't know if we do the square
Wait,
dancing
you
thing.
played some Cajun music last year, so do
Yeah,
you
I
think that
did.
might happen? Is there? Can we
I
break
don't
some
know.
news?
I don't know about that. I don't know.
Come on.
But I might have to give that square dancing thing a try.
All right.
If Trent's
Okay.
gonna do it, well then I guess I'm gonna have to do it, right?
My wife did it last year. I
Had a blast, right?
Yeah, and I started looking for her, and I couldn't find her, and then I just gave up and sat sat down. And she still hasn't forgiven me for not square dancing with her. But thanks to our listeners, she had plenty of people to square dance with. Tim's going to be there too. Jimmy will be giving a talk. A wonderful kind of cast of speakers: Monsignor Eugene Morris, Father David McConey, Rod Bennett, as I said, Bishop Caggiano, Father Paul Check. Father Paul Check, one of my personal favorite speakers. I would go anywhere, anytime to hear him talk on the Lord and on His church. And it's just also just a great time. Do you guys have fun at these things?
Well,
is it
I
stressful for you?
look forward to it every year. I love the conference because it's a chance where we get to have face-to-face interactions with those who support Catholic Answers, who've benefited from this apostolate. And it just makes it a lot of fun. We're not just those guys on the radio or on YouTube.
Yeah.
People say, "You're real." Huh? It's like, last time I checked, I certainly was. And you're real, too.
It actually is a surprise when people find out you're real. Like with Carlo, he seems real, but with
I do seem more like a
you
cartoon character
seem
sometimes.
a little bit more android, possible artificial intelligence.
Android? So I'm like Data from
Not
Star
androgynous, android.
Right, android.
Oh, okay, all right.
No, because if I was an android, I'd do what Data always does on Star Trek and remind people about it every 5 seconds. That's because I'm an android.
Carlo,
But I'm an
look forward
android.
to it or not.
I do. I like the part where you emphasized everyday participants.
Yeah.
That's what's, in my opinion, most fun about the conference is just hanging out every day, all
Yeah.
day, being there. And if people want to come up and chat and have a conversation, they have a question, we get into some great discussions.
Right.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun, and you guys will be doing. Basically, you have a panel discussion where it's a free for all. People can ask you anything. You're up there. All the apologists are up there. Chris is usually there. Father Hugh Barber, and many people say afterwards that's the most fun 2.5 hours that they've spent in a long time. It's just a blast. People get to pepper you with questions, and then you get to correct each other. And Carlo sits next to Jimmy, gives his answer, and goes, "Is that right, Jimmy?"
Amen to that, brother.
We're talking a little bit about oh, come on. They're eating ice cream out there on the other side of the glass. That's mean.
There
All
was
right.
still some left over, but we're here for 2 hours.
We're talking about the death of a Supreme Court justice, the third longest serving Supreme Court justice in the history of the United States, John Paul Stevens. Sorry, you messed me up. What was that hand signal for?
I don't know. It said, I saw that it said second longest living. So I was
The second longest. Oh, that's what you were correcting me. Okay. You could just speak up to correct me. Everybody knows I get most of what I say wrong. So it's a little minor corrections are always helpful. Okay, but here's the problem. Okay, so he's a judge. Let's say he's a judge. I think he was like a Presbyterian, maybe, possibly a Methodist. Not that those are the same thing, but he was mainline Protestant guy. And so let's say he believes the gospel and he doesn't want to uphold abortion. Okay, I'm not just talking about John Paul Stevens. Could be anybody. He doesn't want to rule in favor of abortion, but there's, he believes that that's what the Constitution says, is that it's not for him to outlaw it, that it would have to be a constitutional amendment to outlaw it. What are his moral obligations as a judge? Like, if you know something's intrinsically evil, in other words, can you say, yeah, but it's legal, and just leave it at that? Or do you have to resign? Or what do you got to do?
Well, that boils down to a larger question, I believe, about the issue of cooperation with evil.
Oh, okay.
And this affects all of us. It's not just judges. What if you serve on a jury and a death penalty case is up or an abortion case is up as a Catholic and you are opposed to both of those things? How do you carry out your obligations to the law? And it's anything. You drive the city bus, and the city bus stops at an abortion facility, and you're driving women there every day to get abortions. Are you doing something wrong? So what the church has traditionally done is to understood that we all cooperate with evil, even in extremely remote ways. We pay taxes, we drive the bus that people take to all kinds of bad places. And the church understands that it's permissible for us to have remote material cooperation with evil, that we don't intend the evil, and our cooperation isn't what makes the evil possible. It would still happen without us. But as you get closer and closer to the evil, when it becomes more proximate, and that you are the one who's making the evil possible, and especially if you desire the evil to happen, which is formal cooperation with evil, then that's a big giant no-no.
Right.
You can't do that. Like, you can't take someone to an abortion facility for the express purpose of them getting an abortion, for example.
Because you're making an act of the will that's wrong, and then you're following up on it.
Yeah, so if you're the boyfriend that drives your girlfriend to the abortion facility because
no.
you want this to be taken care of, you're just as guilty, essentially.
That's
basically.
You're assenting to the intrinsically evil act.
Right.
Even if you're not the one doing it, you're
Correct.
formally cooperating with it. So when you draw the line, though, and that's where you've got clear cases that you're not really cooperating, or clear cases where you are, there are cases in the middle. I was actually just looking up here an old law article on Catholic judges in capital cases. It was published in the Notre Dame Law Review by John Garvey and Amy Coney Barrett, who herself has a decent chance of maybe taking a Supreme Court position if she gets nominated in the future. And they conclude in the article that it's complex, depending on the cases and because sometimes juries will recommend for the death penalty. Other times it's within a judge's discretion to do so. I would say that if a judge is conflicted in a case, bound by his conscience or by his faith, he can always recuse himself. So I think that might be the first thing, to be able to ask for a recusal, and then if that is not possible, to try to confront the case as fairly and morally as you can.
Do you think all right?
Yeah, it's becomes very sticky and hard situations to discern. Like Trent said, some are more clear than others, but some are in the gray areas.
Let me just go to the extreme then. Okay, so say it becomes a law that the Holocaust or something, and you're a judge, and you're like, well, that is the law, and my job is to vindicate the law. At some point, don't you have to say, look, I know it's the law that I'm supposed to say these people get put on a boxcar,
I see what you're saying.
But I'm not doing it. I'm just not participating.
Just because it's legal or it's a law, it doesn't follow that it's morally correct.
Now,
right.
Now, in these cases, though, we have to make distinctions between heroic acts, good acts, and evil acts. So, for example, civilly disobeying a totalitarian government, I would say, is good, if not heroic, because you're bringing upon extreme punishments to yourself. Someone who would have to cooperate, they may commit evil, maybe lightly so, but we have to understand compounding factors, or they're being coerced in these situations.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, that makes sense. Trent and Carlo are our guests this hour. We're going to talk about more newsy type things coming up, but we're not just going to stay on the death penalty and abortion. A lot coming up. Give us a call, 888-318-7884.
Catholic Answers Live.
In his new audio presentation, The Very First Fathers, apologist Jimmy Akin takes you on a tour of the earliest Christian writings outside the New Testament. From the most famous figures and most notable works to those lesser known but no less important, this pivotal time in the development of the early church is revealed in fascinating detail. Jimmy shows how, even in the first century after the resurrection, it was necessary to defend and explain truths that are still under attack today, such as the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist and the perpetual virginity of Mary. The Very First Fathers is a compelling look at the dawn of the Christian age and edifying listening for anyone who wants to understand and defend the full truth of Catholicism. Order your copy of The Very First Fathers today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. It's free, and you'll have instant access to our daily broadcast, the schedule of upcoming shows, and you'll even be able to search the archive and listen to thousands of past shows. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
Have you subscribed to the Catholic Answers Radio Club newsletter? This is Catholic Answers Live host Cy Kellett, and I want to tell you about our new weekly newsletter full of behind-the-scenes information and facts you need to know about the show. It's easy to sign up. Just visit CatholicAnswersLive.com. and look for the newsletter sign-up box on the front of the page. It's a great way to keep up to date with what's happening with the show and see what's coming in the days ahead, delivered weekly into your inbox. Sign up today for the Catholic Answers Radio Club newsletter and see what you've been missing. Go to CatholicAnswersLive.com.
I'm Gloria Purvis.
I'm Monsignor Charles Pope.
And I'm Deacon Harold. The Morning Glory team faces up to the Face app.
Monday morning, 7 Eastern. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. It's our panel discussion this Friday. Having a lot of fun with Carlo and what's this guy? Trent Horn. Oh yeah, Trent Horn. All right, all right.
Who's this guy?
Who's what guy?
What guy? Who? Him?
Who's on first? I haven't gone to calls though yet, so I should let you, the callers talk with you. Let's go to Kyle in Fort Wayne, Indiana, listening on 106.3 Redeemer Radio. Kyle, you there with us? Hi, Kyle.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Thanks for taking my call.
Happy to. You got a question or comment?
Yeah, I was listening to a Frances Kissling interview from a couple of weeks ago on NPR, and she was saying some interesting things about abortion and that kind of thing. And just wondering if you guys have listened to that interview and your comments on it.
Well, hang on. First of all, NPR did an interview with a pro-abortion Catholic.
Surprising.
That is shocking to me. Oh, wait. Oh, sorry. No, that's not shocking at all. Okay, so they didn't find one of the millions and millions of pro-life Catholics. They went with Frances Kissling, the head of...
The former president of Catholics for Choice.
Catholics for Choice. I didn't hear the interview. Did you? Either of you hear the interview?
I did not. Is there anything that stuck out with you? I'm trying to find an article here.
Yeah, it's the one thing that she had said was something about how the church doesn't have a set position on when life begins.
Oh,
and so one of the arguments was kind of going from there. So I was wondering if, was that correct? What is the church's stance like at the very beginning? When does life start? And then how can you argue abortion if we don't think that, or the church doesn't have a definition of that?
Okay, Kyle, if I may ask a question, and then I'll let one of these guys answer. Nobody pointed out to her that science tells us when life begins?
You're giving
Right.
NPR too much credit here.
NPR, so,
Okay, all right, fair enough. So she wanted to know, she doesn't accept what science says, apparently. She wants to know if the church has told us when life begins, assuming that she means human life. Help us out, Trent.
Right. She's probably referring to the 1974 Vatican Declaration on Procured Abortion, which includes, in footnote 19, it says this: this declaration expressly leaves aside the question of the moment when the spiritual soul is infused. So God has not revealed to us the precise moment when the soul enters the body and when that happens, because conception is a process. The new chromosomes from the sperm and the egg bond together. It's a process that takes about 24 hours. So people might debate, is it when the sperm enters the ovum? Is it when the first cell division takes place? Is it sometime after that? So the document says there is not a unanimous tradition on this point, and authors are as yet in disagreement. But it says it is a philosophical problem from which our moral affirmation remains independent for two reasons. So they say even if we don't know when the soul enters the new human organism, we do know that it's a human organism. It says, supposing ablated animation, there is still nothing less than a human life preparing for and calling for a soul in which the nature received from parents is completed. On the other hand, it suffices that this presence of the soul be probable, and one can never prove the contrary, in order that the taking of life involve accepting the risk of killing a man. So what the church, what is being taught here in the declaration is that even if we don't know the exact moment the soul enters the body, we have a human being. Scientifically, we know this. You risk killing a human being with a soul. Even if the soul has not been infused yet, there's still a human being here who deserves respect and protection under the law.
And certainly by the time you had the first cell division, it has to be a human being, because you can't have the cells divide until the DNA is completed
What the authors of the Declaration refer to when they say there's not a unanimous tradition is that in the past you had people like Aquinas and others who argue that the rational soul may have entered the body later on in gestation because they had an incorrect view of human biology.
Oh.
They believe that the soul, you went through sort of a vegetative state of development, then an animal state of development, and then finally become a rational animal and you get the rational soul later on. But they were operating with an incorrect understanding of what, and Carlo's the whiz here on Aquinas, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, what the formal cause is for human development. That if they knew about DNA, they would know that's the formal cause and it's present from conception. So, there's differing opinions about when the soul enters the body because, the science of biology didn't catch up. We didn't discover the sperm and egg until the 16th and the 18th centuries.
What any insights you want to share from Aquinas on that, or
no? Just the only thought is that anytime you have any sort of if we have the data to verify empirically a living organism, in as much as it is a living organism, it's going to have a vital principle. And given the traditional Aristotelian Thomistic philosophy, to have a vital principle means to have a soul. And if it has a soul, given what we know that it's going to develop into, that living organism is going to develop and actualize all of the potentials that a human being eventually actualizes in normal circumstances, that it is a human being. So that it would have a rational soul at that moment whenever that entity, that being, is a living organism, as opposed to a non-living organism, rather than receiving new, what he said, formal causes like substantial forms, right?
Yeah.
So the substantial form of making something a vegetative being, the substantial form of making something an animal, and then you have the substantial form of a rational soul, right?
Right.
These are different kinds of vital principles, the principle by which something is living rather than non-living. So at whatever moment you have something living rather than non-living, we would say philosophically that the rational soul is present.
When it's a rational being.
Correct.
Yeah, right, which means a human being, as
right,
far
the
as we
rational
know.
soul united to matter is a rational animal or a human being.
Right.
And I think that the key I would just say to our listeners is when people bring this up, you say, well, why are Catholics pro-life? The answer is we're pro-life for the same reason any reasonable person should be pro-life, that human beings have equal basic rights, and we can know from science that the unborn are human beings or just younger members of our species.
Correct.
And just run it from that, and we don't have to. What's funny is to me, people
what about
always
the
say,
person who says this though? But life develops over time. There's a process of development. So
sure thing.
But some people say that like it's a magic word. Like, oh yeah, but that develops. So maybe the full humanity hasn't developed at 3 months or something.
Well, my 2-year-old has some intellectual capabilities. He's talking like up a storm right now and putting together concepts and sentences. But guess what? He still can't engage in the intellectual activities that we're engaging in now.
Okay.
So he's going to develop in actualizing that power continuously throughout the various stages of his life, but it doesn't follow from that he's somehow not human as a 2-year-old. And so we'd simply push that further back to the moment that the rational human, that the human being comes into existence, that there are certain potentials there, of certain powers that are there in potential, that simply throughout the various stages of development will eventually be actualized. Trent?
As human beings, we develop more abilities in life, but we don't develop more humanity.
Amen.
Okay, so humanity is not a thing that develops. That is to say, you either have it or you don't have it.
That's right. You can't have more of humanity than me,
but your
because
potentials
I would be
are
lesser
something
of
that,
a human being.
Right, but your potentials do develop.
Yes, the powers that we have are there,
Right.
present, existing in potential, that can eventually be actualized throughout the various stages of development.
But even if almost all of your potentials are thus far undeveloped, even if you're a single cell organism,
Still
if you're
a
a
human
member of
being.
the human species, you've got all your humanity.
Correct.
Yeah, you are not a potential person. You are a person with great potential.
Thank you.
Very
I
beautifully
appreciate you
put.
saying
I believe that was actually that was a pro-life philosopher. I want to say maybe his last name was Joyce. I can't put that.
I hope it was. Kyle, does all of this satisfy you?
Yes, guys. Thanks so much for your help ciphering through that. Thanks a
Sure
lot.
thing.
Yeah, thanks for bringing it to our attention. it can be, I find among, I don't know, sophisticated pro-choice Catholics, there is often a reference to Thomas Aquinas. They'll often say, well, Aquinas didn't believe you were fully human at conception. And I feel like, I don't feel like they see the irony of utterly denying science.
It's also self-serving, because these same people, I'll say, well, Aquinas believed homosexual acts were disordered. What do you think about that? I highly doubt these pro-choice Catholics are going to agree with him on that. So it's really self-serving when they do that.
Right.
Yeah. And would you say
even if like we were in the same, Trent, I'd like to get your thoughts on this, that even if we were in the same historical circumstance with our lack of knowledge concerning those early stages of life, even though we didn't know exactly the point when the being was a rational being or a human being, right? That still the moral principle, like rather than the golden rule, the silver rule, right? To not do unnecessary harm.
Oh, absolutely.
Given our lack of knowledge. I mean, if I'm hunting in the woods, right, and I'm deer hunting, and I hear some ruffling in the bushes, it would be immoral for me to shoot in the bush, not knowing whether it was a deer or the other hunter who's coming to meet me at my blind.
That's right. So you could ask these people, they'll say, these Catholics for choice advocates, they'll say, well, Aquinas didn't believe that you had a rational soul at conception. I'll ask them, okay, did Aquinas believe abortion was morally permissible?
Absolutely not, because he would have said, even if there's not a human present, that's contraception at the very least. You're
attacking a human life. If these people are, they're against the attacking of human life. And we can still make an argument that contraception is wrong, because even if it does not attack a human organism, it still attacks a human life that is about to come into existence. So that's a good point to bring it. Like, I would ask these people, like if I was in an interview or debate with Kissling or John O'Brien from Catholics for Choice, I'd say, okay, can you give me an example of a church father or a saint, whoever said that abortion was a good thing, and they can't do it.
No.
Can't do it in 2,000 years of church history. Can't be done.
No, and even the Didache.
The very first catechism says you shall not, kill an embryo or kill an unborn, and you shall not slay an infant. Which in the ancient world, you had abortions via pessaries, by potions, but it was usually easier just to give birth to a child and then abandon them in the wilderness.
And then too, I think in the mix of all this is the distinction between the principle of do not take innocent human life, and then the other principle of determining factually what is human life, what is innocent human life, and those are two principles that we're constantly dealing with in moral theology and moral philosophy. We have the principle, and then it's a matter of determining the facts in applying those principles.
And science has been very helpful in that.
Indeed, it has.
Even though in some ways, well, you know what? I'll take a break. We'll come back because we got a lot more news to cover. We got a ton of news to cover. Kyle, thanks for the call. Really appreciate it. Other folks on the line, we're going to get to you. Don't worry. We'll do it right when we come back, and then we will continue our discussion of the state of the world today from a Catholic perspective. And the way we'll do that is I'll throw out some news stories to Carlo and Trent, and they will give they can't give the Catholic Church's official response, but they will give a well-educated Catholic response when we come back right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Miss a show? Make sure to catch up by downloading the podcast, available online at Catholic.com.
Do you love praying for people? Have you ever wanted to use your gift of prayer to share Jesus with others and build up the body of Christ? Start a public prayer station with St. Paul Street Evangelization. Listen to people's needs, pray with them, or invite them to meet you at church. St. Paul Street Evangelization can help you get started. Find out how at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
The wisdom of Mother Angelica.
The blood of Jesus shed on the cross healed all our wounds. A lot of people say, well, I can do what I want. I can commit any sin. Jesus saved me. You can't be presumptuous. All holy God cannot allow you to sin or give you the right to sin by dying for you. That doesn't make any sense.
For more information on Mother Angelica, visit Religious Catalog at EWTNRC.com.
Hi, this is Trent Horn, and you've probably heard me explain Catholicism to non-Catholic callers on the radio or engage opponents in formal public debates. I've always hoped these interactions would show people how to graciously defend and share our faith. But they're not enough. That's why I've created a weekly podcast that will help Catholics answer the toughest objections against our faith. Every episode of the Council of Trent will provide listeners with a conversation roadmap that will help them share their faith with anyone. Keep in mind that I hate boring lectures. These podcasts will contain entertaining, informative, and practical explanations of the faith, as well as interviews with the best Catholic writers and speakers in the world today. Visit TrentHornPodcast.com today to find out how you can subscribe to my new podcast. That's TrentHornPodcast.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Carlo Broussard and Trent Horn are our guests today as we continue with our panel discussion. When I said they can't give the official Catholic, all I meant was they're not Catholic officials. I didn't mean they don't know the official teaching. Like if you want to know the official teaching of the Catholic Church on, say, confession, you guys would know that, right?
Some things we can give the official
that's,
Catholic
you could
teaching,
give
but some things there is no official teaching. So
the Church hasn't spoken, but it's we can talk about the principles.
Correct.
And if we're interested, we can share our understanding of the principles in our own lives. It's sort of like when in St. Paul's letter to the Corinthians, he used to say, not I, but the Lord, or not the Lord, but I. Right. And that Paul was able to say, Jesus gave me this, and well, Jesus didn't teach me this, but on my authority, I'm going to say this. And because he's an apostle and he's inspired to write scripture, he does get a lot of authority to do that. So we're not able to do that, but we can say, well, this is, not I, but the church, although I would agree with what the church teaches, or not the church, but here is at least how I understand it and would apply it in a certain case.
But I think what people would want to know is between the two of you, which one should I trust more? I mean,
I always go with the church, and when I'm with the church,
I mean between you two, Carlo and Trent, not between.
It depends what it is.
And the church. I'm going to a caller. This is not working. Jim in Tampa, Florida, listening to EWTN channel 130 on Sirius XM satellite radio. You are up next, but before I take your call, let me just real quick give out the phone number because I've forgotten to do that. 888-318-7884. If you'd like to get in on the conversation, 888-318-7884. All right, now it's up to you, Jim in Tampa, Florida. Your question or comment.
Hey, Trent, this is Jim. Yeah, I love your show, and I'm always happy when you're on.
Thanks.
I just have a quick recommendation. I have three of your books, and I have I think it's Why I'm a Catholic, and then you have a larger, more developed one. It's kind of an olive green about a biblical defense of the Catholic Church.
Yes,
that's
and
the Ignatius
then you have the new one you just came out about the false Jesus.
Yes,
and I was wondering, would you recommend that I read them in that order?
I think a good order to read that, Jim, would be to start with Why We're Catholic, because it's a nice intro to a lot of different topics. Then Counterfeit Christ, which is more of a popular level read, but with a focus on Jesus. And then you can round it out with The Case for Catholicism, which is my in-depth treatment of issues that divide Catholics and Protestants. So I'd probably go Why We're Catholic, Counterfeit Christ, and then The Case for Catholicism.
Do you want to know which order Carlo and I would read them in, or are you just happy with that, James?
Yeah. One other question. You mentioned a book, I think the first church fathers or the earliest church fathers. Is that available through Catholic Answers?
That might have been in a commercial. We have a book, The Fathers Know Best, which is a reference.
We also have a free ebook right now, too, on the church fathers.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, so we have a book by Jimmy Akin, The Fathers Know Best, but I thought we had an audio product and an ebook.
Jimmy's audio product is 3 CDs, the earliest church fathers.
Yes, that's it.
And if you go to the Catholic Answers Facebook page, you can download a free ebook on the early church fathers. But that's just through Sunday night, so you should go get that before Sunday night. They'll take it down at that point. So, all that's there. I wanted to give my order, but he doesn't want to hear what my order for Trent's books would be: first, Abolition of Man, and then Mere Christianity. And I'd probably stop there.
Don't tell people I was C.S. Lewis's ghostwriter. It's going to spoil the illusion.
I might actually start with Orthodoxy.
Going even back more to Chesterton. Or you could start with a good overview, either Why We're Catholic by me, or another good overview is Carlo's book, Prepare the Way, which is a nice, it's in-depth, but it actually covers a wide ground, actually, of all the different issues that block people from being Catholic.
Yeah, that would actually be a good follow-up from why we're Catholic. So
Yeah.
why we're Catholic would be the intro.
And then
Prepare the way would come after that. Yeah.
I know you guys are eating ice cream in there, but I am going to need some more calls screened. So I'm just letting you know. 888 318
Put that spoon down.
I got another news story for you, and this was probably going to take us into the next hour, maybe. I don't know. I do not know. But the Time Magazine, first of all, I don't want to shock you, but Time Magazine still exists, in case you were both going to be like, what is Time Magazine? When I was a kid, Time Magazine was a big deal. If it was on the cover of Time, that was a big deal. And right now on the cover of Time Magazine is the space race, this new space race. And it's a weird kind of space race because it's like governments are racing against governments, and they're all the governments are racing against these private companies like Elon Musk's SpaceX, and then the guy from Amazon has something,
Jeff Bezos,
Blue Origin or Blue Space or something. And
can he get my stuff into space on next day delivery?
That's what he's working on. That's what he's working on.
Good times.
And then, oh man. Well, okay, I'm going to get off topic if I go that direction. But anyways, so it's all about how everybody wants to get to the moon. Everybody wants to get to Mars. They're spending billions of dollars on it. The United States just spent $16 billion, and there's going to be more billions spent on this new rocket that they're making, which has 5 million pounds of thrust, which I don't even know what that is. I don't know. That's a lot of thrust, I'm guessing. But
thrust is the force of an engine as it propels energy behind it that moves a craft forward. So you can have jets.
But 5 million pounds,
that's enough thrust
to move the Earth. Maybe, I don't know.
It's nowhere near
I'm not
enough.
good with probably you could move the moon with that though, right? Or Mars, or maybe move the sun a little bit.
Do you think those things weigh 5 million pounds?
Oh, that's how we figured that out. Okay, so 5 million pounds of thrust. Okay, so I want to ask you for a moral question about this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's a lot of money that private individuals are spending on getting to space, that private companies are spending on getting to space, that governments are spending on getting to space, and people are starving, like literally starving to death on the planet Earth. Mm-hmm. I don't even know how to do the moral calculus here. Do either of you have we do. Well, I'll start with you, Carlo. I'm just going to put it this way. Do we have a moral obligation as governments, as businesses, as individuals to actually do something about the starving people, or can we just leave it for the markets to take care of that? It'll all straighten it out. Markets eventually will straighten it out.
Well, we do have a moral obligation to take care of it in the best way that those who are in authority prudentially discern and choose on how to do it and try to look to the moral principles to help guide them in making their decisions. I think what you have here and what you're asking is initially, concerning spending money for space exploration, right, and technological advances. Is that intrinsically evil? No, that's a good thing considered in and of itself. But of course, we always have to bring in, right, the effects that that's going to have and the circumstances and the consequences and the intentions in order to evaluate the morality of that. So it would be immoral to spend all money on those sorts of goods and reject the great goods of feeding the poor, right?
Right.
In an absolute way. Of course, that would be immoral. But if you're doing both and how do you determine how much money to spend here, how much money to spend there? Those are moral calculations that I'm going to just say go beyond my pay grade, brother. And I'm glad I'm not in charge.
Okay. All right.
But
all right.
I mean, but
we do have a positive obligation
Absolutely.
to care for the, around the world you see. I mean,
but
I was just down at the border
the how
today.
is the question.
The how is the problem. Because sometimes when we act in ways, and this is something that's important, people are like, oh, we should just help the poor, and we should. But sometimes we don't understand that our actions can actually harm people. And we don't intend it. So, for example, if let's say you have in Africa, we're going to send a bunch of, people donate a ton of shoes in Africa, Tom's shoes. You donate a ton of shoes, people get shoes. We think, well, we're helping the poor, aren't we? Well, you're helping some people who get shoes, but then what happens when you put all the African shoemakers and cobblers out of business? And suddenly now they're impoverished and they can't make a living and they're dependent on foreign handouts. There's a great documentary actually called Poverty Incorporated that talks about how many efforts to reduce poverty around the world can be counterproductive. in that they have these unintended consequences by destabilizing local industry, for example. Other things that can happen is, let's say you give foreign aid to some countries. You're right, people are starving all over the world. But let's say, the U.S. spends money on space programs. People are not starving here in the United States, except for people who are mentally ill and, things like that, in unusual circumstances.
I mean,
no, of course, but there's not. You would agree that when you talk about like starvation, it's usually in other parts of the world, like the global South.
Oh yes, right.
So
right.
then the problem there is, in some of those cases, the reason those people are starving is because their governments that run their countries are incredibly corrupt. So even if we do send money to help them, the money just goes to a kleptocracy. So then you have a problem there of an inability to be able to help people in one way, whereas that money could use even for other things that benefit the poor. Let's say even space exploration. Space exploration has given us technologies like better water purification systems. You got to have really good water purifiers to keep people up in space. Guess what? If we can get that to people who live in these impoverished countries, we're actually helping them escape many of the threats of poverty. So it's not an either or in these cases, that you're not just throwing money at the moon. Like goods that help human beings do come back from it.
Repurpose, baby.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, right. And where would the poor be without Tang, right? And that was invented. Well, okay, it's not clearly. You know what I'm talking about? Tang,
astronaut food and drink, yes, and astronaut ice cream.
Yeah, yeah. And
I remember, speaking of the technology that's developed from space exploration, I remember at the elementary school that I taught at back in southern Louisiana, one of the students' grandfather, perhaps, who works at NASA, came and gave a presentation, and I remember him talking about the material inside chip bags that keep the chips fresh.
Oh yeah,
is a result of of the discoveries and space exploration and whatnot. So
I have to say, though,
things can come out of it.
All right, I'm going to continue this conversation on the other side, and you're welcome to call 888-318-7884, because here's the deal: if I can't feed my kids, and I see the richest man in the world building rockets, I gotta say I'm going to be mad about that. I'm not going to feel sanguine about that, and I feel like there is.
But we have to ask the question, why is that man able to build rockets in one country? I can't feed my kids in another. The causes go very deep for us to understand.
All right, fair enough. We'll continue our discussion of the news, the world, and all that from a Catholic perspective with Carlo Broussard and Trent Horn. 888-318-7884 is the number. 888-318-7884. Right back after this.
Over the years, we have heard thousands of stories of how the ministry of Catholic Answers and Catholic Answers Live has changed lives all over the world. Do you have such a story? We'd love to hear how Catholic Answers has changed your life. Send your story to us today. Email us at mystory@catholic.com, or you can call 619-387-7200 to make an audio recording of your story.
Is the church wrong on contraception? In a culture that worships the pursuit of sexual pleasure, the Catholic Church's teaching on contraception can seem archaic and unintelligible. Its critics say it's outdated, theologically unfounded, and even harmful. And even faithful Catholics can have difficulty explaining this moral teaching. Catholic Answers is out to change all of that. That's why we've just released Trent Horn's dynamic new DVD, The Case Against Contraception. Using scripture, papal and magisterial teachings, natural law, and new insights provided by social science and medicine, Trent puts forward a compelling case for Catholic teachings with his trademark charity and persuasive graciousness. Be prepared to give a defense. Order your copy of The Case Against Contraception today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
What difference does it make who or what you worship, or what you believe? Sharing the faith used to make some people mad because it challenged their own strong beliefs. Today, it makes a lot of people yawn because they don't have strong beliefs about anything. Religious indifference is the great spiritual sickness of our age, a product of the relativism that dominates modern culture. This is Matt Nelson, and in my new book, Just Whatever, I'll take down the building blocks of religious indifference one by one. We'll look at the different kinds of indifference you tend to encounter in your friends and family members to see where they come from and why they're seductive. What you believe matters. Find out why and what to do about it in my new book, Just Whatever. You can order your copy of Just Whatever by calling 1-888-291-8000, by visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Hey everyone, Carlo Broussard here. Did you know that you can arrange for me and a host of other on-fire Catholic Answers speakers to speak at your conference or parish event? Here's how you do it. Go to CatholicAnswersSpeakers.com and you'll find all the information that you need to book me or our other great speakers. That's CatholicAnswersSpeakers.com. We look forward to seeing you.
With the recent commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the release of Humanae Vitae, there have been fresh attacks on Catholic teaching from outside and, unfortunately, inside the Church. That's why Catholic Answers thought it critical to provide a vigorous affirmation of Paul VI's prophetic wisdom with our newest book, Inseparable: 5 Perspectives on Sex, Life, and Love in Defense of Humanae Vitae. We asked 5 distinguished contributors to reflect on and defend Humanae Vitae from 5 perspectives, each of them compelling, together forming a mosaic of truth. Don't be caught uninformed when the topic of contraception comes up among friends, family, and co-workers. Order your copy of Inseparable today by calling 1-888-291-8000 or visiting the shop at Catholic.com.
In his new audio presentation, The Very First Fathers, apologist Jimmy Akin takes you on a tour of the earliest Christian writings outside the New Testament. From the most famous figures and most notable works to those lesser known but no less important, this pivotal time in the development of the early church is revealed in fascinating detail. Jimmy shows how, even in the first century after the resurrection, it was necessary to defend and explain truths that are still under attack today, such as the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist and the perpetual virginity of Mary. The Very First Fathers is a compelling look at the dawn of the Christian age and edifying listening for anyone who wants to understand and defend the full truth of Catholicism. Order your copy of The Very First Fathers today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Welcome to Controversy Hour on Catholic Answers. That's what I'm just calling that. That's like, I just thought of that. Oh, people will listen now if you call it Controversy Hour. Right, Nick? That was good. All right. It's not really Controversy Hour, though, so it's a little misleading. It's really just a Catholic discussion of the state of the world where I propose some news stories to our very well-prepared guests, and then they give me a Catholic perspective on those things, and I get to choose who the guests are, and I chose Carlo Broussard and Trent Horn today, and man, I did a good job. You can all, yes, it's okay. You can all say thank you to me. You're welcome, Nick. You're welcome about the great guests I got. Well, we lots of calls, so we're going to get to calls. You're welcome to call and participate. 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. And the story we were talking about a bit before, in the Time Magazine cover story, yes, Time Magazine still exists. In the Time Magazine cover story on the space race, a slight moral objection raised. And you generally hear this a lot associated with the space race, I guess because it's so exorbitantly expensive and it's just so obvious, like people are leaving the planet. And that has the implication to it, I suppose, to leaving other people behind or not being concerned about those who are poor. So the moral question about spending all this money, billions and billions and hundreds of billions of dollars, to get a few people to skip around on the moon or to maybe visit Mars and all that kind of thing, it seems in some ways to lack a proper sense of proportion given the fact that so many people are lacking even the basic necessities of life.
Well, let me take a crack at this.
All right, crack away, Trent Horn.
All right, let me spool a little bit here.
Spool.
Well, we look at what was the origin of the space race? The origin of the space race was the competition in the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. That's why I did not enjoy that in the new movie about Neil Armstrong with Ryan Gosling, that they take out, they don't show him putting the American flag on the moon. It's like, well, we did it for all humanity. No, we did it to show the Soviets that we are have more technological prowess than
Plus,
them.
if I can just say, the flag looks awesome on the moon.
Well, yeah, there's no wind; it's just up there.
You got to show that.
Yeah,
the American flag was made to be on the moon.
It looks great.
Yeah.
So the space race and the technology that was poured in the 1960s, by the end of this decade, we will have a man on the moon. I am Maya Diamond Joe Quimby from Springfield.
That is a very good Ted Kennedy imitation. So
right. So you might say that there's a roundabout way that that's the massive amount of money in the 1960s that was poured into the space race is actually good for people who live in extreme poverty in extreme circumstances. Because if you look at the history of the world, I'm finishing my book on socialism right now. In the Soviet Union, socialist communal food production policies led to famines that killed millions of people.
Yeah, some of that was intentional, though.
It wasn't.
Like they wanted to kill Ukrainians.
Yeah, they did.
I mean, when I say they, I mean Stalin.
Stalin did. That's the Ukrainians call it the Holodomor. Just like in Germany there was the Holocaust, there's the Holodomor in Ukraine, for that mass killing by starvation. So when you have the United States wanting to have expressed that it is a superpower that can compete with the Soviet Union, and that is a way to eventually help stamp out communism, which was and still remains today a source of human rights violations around the world, the money we spend into making sure that the United States and those who would defend freedom around the world have the ability to maintain authority and dominion over all aspects of the earth and even in space itself, to provide peaceful societies, peaceful environments for people, and to eventually help to expel this communist threat, actually has raised the standard of living. When you look at the history of the 20th century, societies that have retreated from communism experience leaps and bounds in human development, in improved standards of living, improved life expectancies, lower infant mortality. So to me, once again, everything we do, it has kind of a ripple effect amongst other human beings, and that includes the exploration and technological innovation that is achieved through space exploration.
Fair enough. And it is true that after 1989 and the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of communism, humanity entered the greatest period of spreading of prosperity in the history of the world. It's that when I'll just tell you this little story. When I got out of college, I remember I went on a retreat and it was by a guy who was very concerned about the social situation of the world, and he did a very good job, actually. Among the things he said was that 40,000 children, when I graduated from college, this is the early 1980s, or middle 1980s, 40,000 children a day were dying of hunger or a lack of clean water. 40,000 a day.
Right. Yeah.
Now, in the intervening years, the population of the earth has grown by 3 billion people.
Yes.
And that the number of children who die each day now has not gone up. It has dropped by about 70%. So while we're adding 3 billion people to the planet, we're also creating enough wealth to feed billions and billions more people, save millions of lives. And I say this for two reasons. One, because the fall of communism really released enormous economic energies in the world, really saved millions and billions of lives. And two, people should stop with this overpopulation baloney. More people means more food, not less food. It's obvious if you just look at the statistics.
Yeah, and I think that it's important for us as Catholics, like I think we were talking during the break, that the question of should you help the poor is obvious. You have to. I think it was Archbishop Chaput who said that you'll go to hell if you don't help the poor, if you just abscond on that responsibility.
You know who else said that? Jesus. Go, Carlo. Yeah, you're right. Right, which is I am not sure how church structure works, but I think he's even higher than Archbishop Chaput.
you mean Jesus?
Wait, is Jesus a Messiah or an arch Messiah? We have to catch in there. But the question of how, though, the question of how is where it becomes tricky.
Okay.
And so people can reasonably disagree. So we were talking earlier, like I was talking about how some ways of fighting poverty can actually be counterproductive. But I want to be able to add to that, because some people might think Trent is a heartless monster who doesn't think we should help the poor. No, we should just do it smartly. That's a word, I think. Yes, the adverb, to act in a smart way. For example, in my research, there's something called effective altruism. So effective altruism is taking our resources and using them most efficiently to help those who are in need. When you look at that, one of the most effective ways to help people, ways that I've enjoyed donating to in the past, for example, are by providing malaria nets to people in developing countries. It's a $3 net will save $2 lives through the use of these nets, for example. Very efficient way of saving lives. Another is simply to do direct cash transfers. That
Give people money.
Do an end run around NGOs, around corrupt governments, and get a direct cash transfer directly to the person who is in need. Another great way to do that is through something called microloans. So it's counterintuitive. You think we'll just give people money, but in many cases, you can go online, find a guy who says, I need $50 to buy goats for my goat farm, and you offer him a 0% loan. Mm-hmm. And the fact that he feels the duty to have to pay you back encourages him to spend the money wisely to build up his business, and then he pays you back and use the money to give somebody else a microloan.
Plus, I'll come get the goats. If I don't get my money, I'm coming to get the goats.
I will fly over to Mozambique and get my goat. So it's about looking at ways. That's why I hate this idea that some people will say, oh, you don't believe in helping the poor. And I think sometimes what they mean is, well, you just don't support my program for helping the poor. No, we should be able to prudentially disagree, to have a reasoned debate about the best ways to do that. We all agree we must. Now let's find the smartest ways to achieve the goal.
Again, 888-318-7884 is the number. Actually, Denise in Michigan called us on this very topic. We got you there with us, Denise?
I am. My call's a little bit late, but I was driving home. What I wanted to say was, didn't Mary, the Mother of God, identify herself as the Immaculate Conception?
Indeed, she did. Yes.
She I hit the wrong button there.
Hit the wrong.
She did.
You meant to go to another caller, Sion. That's quite all right.
No, I mean I hit the wrong button. I put Denise on hold there for a second. So Denise, is that your question is about whether Mary is the Immaculate? Oh, because it has. We were talking about when life begins.
When life begins.
Oh, okay. Is that the context you meant that?
Yes, I don't think that she did that without purpose.
No,
well,
she clearly
could have identified herself as immaculate at any stage of life or even prior to life, but she called herself the Immaculate Conception. I think that was with purpose.
Oh, sure, I would agree with that, yeah. But she didn't reveal to us from God at exactly which moment
she was conceived.
Right, precisely the empirical data of when you have the transition from a non-living being to a living being. That would have been helpful if she would have.
But this does give you a kind of
a
really kind of helpful convergence of faith and science.
That's
here.
right. It does point to the importance of protecting the unborn and the importance of protecting human life. Indeed, that testifies to it.
But the church also wouldn't include this, for example, in a catechetical document or magisterial teaching necessarily, because this is an element of private revelation.
Right.
This is to Fatima, Bernadette?
Not at Fatima.
Our Lady of
Bernadette.
Our Lady of Lourdes.
Our Lady of Lourdes, yes.
Yeah.
What was her name? Bernadette Suberus or...
I just know Song of Bernadette. That's I just know the movie.
So that was a private revelation which one can accept and believe, but one is not obliged to believe because it's not a part of the deposit of faith. So if it's helpful to you,
but I believe
it. But what is a part of the private? But what is a part of the deposit of faith is that Mary
was immaculately conceived.
Immaculately conceived.
Yes.
Subaru. Is that correct?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Subaru.
All right.
No.
Denise, I find that very helpful because as much as these two put caveats around it, I do believe that Mary appeared to Bernadette. I do believe that Mary identified herself as the Immaculate Conception. And I do feel a sense of encouragement from that, hey, you're on the right track when you're protecting the unborn from that moment of conception.
And that's the point of private revelations that God gives us in our journey of faith in order to confirm the brethren, right? In order to confirm us in the faith, to help us grow in our faith, and to help us have a greater and deeper devotion to Our Lady in this particular case.
Denise, is that about what you want to say?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. It was really, really helpful. I appreciate it. We got to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more. Well, we'll take more of your calls, actually, when we come back on Catholic Answers Live.
We're glad you're with us. Stick around for more Catholic Answers Live.
Homeschool Connections, an online provider of courses for your Catholic homeschool, is a sponsor of Catholic Answers Live. Homeschool Connections website is homeschoolconnections.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
There's so many things that are wonderful about gathering with Catholic family, to gather with Catholics in the present on earth, knowing that we're also gathering with Catholics from the past and in heaven, that consciousness of the communion of saints uniting heaven and earth.
Meet Dr. David Anders and other EWTN favorites when you attend the EWTN Family Celebration, Saturday, September 21st at Magnus Arena in Denver, Colorado. Register now and find out more at EWTN.com/family celebration.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm delighted that we went to Denise. That was a very helpful call, but it wasn't the call I meant to go to, which makes it confusing why I was saying she was right on topic. She was referring to an earlier topic, a topic about when does life begin. And we're talking a little bit now in light of the billions and hundreds of billions of dollars being sent to...
billions and billions of dollars.
To shoot rich people up to the moon.
Billions of dollars.
Now, was that Richard Nixon?
No, that was another prominent politician who likes to say, he says billionaires and billionaires.
Oh, that was Bernie. Yeah, Bernie.
When you're saying billions
Sanders,
and billions, I want to say billionaires and billionaires.
See, if when I was a kid, if you had said billions and billions, people would have thought of Carl Sagan, who used to say
the pale blue dot.
Billions. I can't do an imitation of Carl Sagan talking about stars and then trying to teach small children that there were so many stars that there couldn't possibly be a god. Don't tell me how Carl Sagan got to be an atheist because he saw so many stars, but he did. Let's go to Maggie in Columbus, Ohio. Columbus is one of my top 10 favorite Ohio cities. Maggie, your comment or question?
It is a fine city. Thanks for taking my call. So the conversation's been really interesting for me because I've been feeling morally convicted. Every day I drive to work and I get off the highway, there is always someone standing there with a sign that says they need cash. And every time I never stop, I never get out my wallet, I keep driving, but I always feel terrible about it. In fact, I sort of hope that they're not going to be there when I'm driving by so I don't have to face it. Right. But I've heard different things. I've heard, at my church, which is in an urban area, they'll say, don't give to the panhandlers, encourage them to come in to get a sandwich at the soup kitchen. But then I've also heard people say, maybe they're just going to use it for drugs you shouldn't give. But then, should we be thinking about, should we be judging how people spend their money? It's just... That's
a tough one, huh? So you want to know, as a Catholic, what are your obligations and what should you be doing when someone's begging for money from you? Is that correct?
The panhandling debate. Panhandling dilemma.
That's it, Maggie?
Yes, that's it.
Oh, yeah. I just want to make sure I got the question right. Either of you want to take this one?
I have a...
Go ahead, Trent.
Sure.
Oh, good, because I wanted to...
Well, this goes back to that question that if someone is hungry, if someone is poor, we ought to help them. That's non-negotiable. The question of how we help them, though, is an issue that requires a prudential judgment. So we should not do things that we think are helping but could enable someone to make a bad decision. So there's a great movie with Steve Carell, not Steve... Yeah, I think Steve Carell, A Beautiful Boy. And it's based on a memoir about a father whose son becomes a drug addict, and the son keeps asking, for money from him. Dad, I just need a little more money. And, the son's, he's down now. He's living in poverty, but the dad says, I can't give you any more because I know you're going to hurt yourself with this. I cannot do that. So in some cases, giving someone money, knowing if you have reasonable moral certainty they're going to hurt themselves with it, you can't do that. Now, the question becomes with someone who is panhandling, we're not in a good position to know how the person will use the money. So this is my personal recommendations. One thing my wife and I like to do is we pass out gift cards for restaurants. So in some cases, if someone's like on an on-ramp.
After you use them, or these are ones that you haven't used yet?
Oh, we leave a little bit on the card for them. We leave 83 cents.
I know Laura would give out money, but I just wasn't sure if you had already been to Olive Garden and now you're just
well,
giving
honestly,
out
the one I picked that's the easiest is McDonald's because because
they're everywhere.
Because they're everywhere. It's easy for someone who is homeless, for example, or who panhandles to find a McDonald's to go and get at least some calories, get coffee, get something to eat, fill their belly. And it's actually economical. You've got the dollar menu. You can actually get a $5 McDonald's gift card can actually go decently far. And I was not paid by Ronald McDonald to come on here and say that. That's or you could do something similar. We would also make homeless bags to give to people. And that way it lowers the probability, Maggie, that someone, with cash, it's easy to spend on a vice that's not great for you. But with a gift card or a bag of things supplies to help, much more likely that will be used for a certain good. Though I think that a person who does not give to a panhandler is not doing anything morally wrong if they're choosing to help the poor in a different way, such as by giving to a soup kitchen, giving to Catholic charities, things like that.
Maggie, I want to get your response on that.
No, I think that's a great suggestion. I was talking to my husband about it, and we talked, maybe we should be just giving more to a soup kitchen or something like that, and maybe I would feel better about it. But I like the gift card idea. Just kind of keep a stack of them in the car, $5 gift cards.
And it's great to do a gift
thank
card.
You. That's very helpful.
A $5 gift card and a holy card. I think you give both, and you're witnessing to that person, because there's also there's still the fact of the matter is, even if we're donating to a charity, God brings people into our lives in various ways. And in these cases, I pray, and sometimes I will give money because I just pray and I just feel moved by the Holy Spirit that it's going to good. And I can't always recommend it in every case. You're going to have to pray and say, God, what do you want me to do in this situation? But now that's in the off-ramp situation. In other situations where you're not in your car, sometimes what I will do is if someone is, hey, buddy, can I get some money or change? I'll say, well, I don't have any money. That's a mental reservation, in that I don't have money for you to give to you right now.
Oh.
But what I do have is I could go inside and buy you something to eat if you'd like that.
I always find that one wonderful, because then you spend a minute with the person too. Like,
you do.
Would you like to come in and I'll get you something?
But what is sad, and it requires prayer to not become cynical, I would say the majority of the time I am declined when I offer that.
Right.
And that shows that the problem we have in America when it comes to poverty and homelessness is not a problem of people not having access to resources. It's usually a problem of mental illness and drug addiction. We have to come up with better ways to protect people from the evils of drugs and to heal them from the physical evils involved in mental illness. And when we fail to do that, poverty naturally ensues.
I want to challenge both of you. While we got Maggie on the line, I want to challenge both you, Carlo and Trent, with a quote from Jesus himself. All right, it's in both Matthew and Luke's Gospels. I'm reading from Luke chapter 6. If someone strikes you on the cheek, turn to him the other also. And if someone takes your cloak, do not withhold your tunic as well. Give to everyone who asks, and if anyone takes what is yours, do not demand it. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I'm particularly interested, of course, in the line that says, give to everyone who asks. It's really, Jesus is not putting a lot of qualifiers around that. So how do you address that?
Well, my first thought is that we do have to take principles of reason, which have been given to us by the same author of those inspired texts and the same words of Jesus himself, right? He's the author of reason. So he has given us principles of reason to use in order to evaluate his words, right, and to interpret Scripture. So in an absolute way, anybody who asks, well, if that were the case, well, then we would have to follow that principle and say anybody who comes knocking on my door and saying, give me all of your money, I would have to give it to him. But that doesn't make sense, right? Because my money is ordered toward my children and my family. I couldn't just give them all of my money, because then a great good would be lost, namely fulfilling my duty as a husband and as a father and taking care of my family. So that's a principle of reason that we could take to that passage in order to help us understand perhaps what Jesus is trying to get at there, is that we need to have a generous attitude towards those who are coming to us in need. And if it's in accord with reason, and reason leads us and demands that there's a justice here, that we need to fulfill justice and help them in serving the poor, then we ought to do that. And how we do that, Trent gave some great examples there. And even if we're not demanded by justice to provide for this particular individual, well, then perhaps it is an opportunity to exercise great virtue and heroic love, right? Even if you're not obliged, right? It is an opportunity, as Trent said, being moved by the Spirit in this particular circumstance to perform an act of love for God and for the person. And of course, that's going to contribute to an increase in grace and sanctity and holiness. So that's something else that we also have to take into account when trying to discern these situations.
And we have to remember, when Jesus speaks, Jesus is a rabbi. Rabbis teach in hyperbole. Say, well, Jesus says, give to everyone who asks, and whenever they ask, you're supposed to do it. Say, well, Jesus also says to cut off your hand and gouge your eye out. He says...
No, he doesn't.
He does?
He says, if your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. Your hand never causes you to sin. That's not possible. Only your will can cause you to sin. He's making that's not just hyperbole. That's that's like almost a joke that he's making there.
The point he's making is that if something is what ends up leading you into sin, or the eye. I look upon things in a lustful way. I use my hand to do evil.
Because you have kung fu power. I mean, you can do a lot of evil with your hands.
These are deadly weapons here. If I accidentally kill you with them, I go to jail. If you accidentally kill me, you go to jail anyways. So the Tarantino movie that's out. But the point is that Jesus, he speaks in hyperbole, and that's something that's how rabbis have taught traditionally, and how they still teach today. He says, be better to, the other rabbis of the time would say things like, it's better to throw yourself in a furnace than to do this evil thing.
And Jesus said, call no man father, right? If you don't hate mother and father, you're not worthy of me. And I think Luke 14:26, right? But
so
Matthew,
he's using these hyperboles to create a disposition.
That's right. Matthew explains the meaning of that, meaning if we love mother and father more than Jesus.
So when Jesus says, give to those who ask, immediately after this says, do unto others, you would have them do unto you. The point is, don't divide up people as saying, these are the people worthy of my help because they're friends or family or they're Jews. Divide up so that even enemies, even those who are part of a race of people who have normally been antagonistic towards you, to recognize their common humanity.
And we have to have a charitable disposition towards them as well.
Yeah. Okay. That's very helpful. Thank you. Maggie, is it helpful to you?
Yes, extremely helpful. You may have solved my problem. Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate it.
You're welcome very much, Maggie. Thank you. I don't think it's possible to solve Maggie's problem, though, because there's always going to be prudential judgments you have to make. You just have to accept, hey, sometimes I'm actually going to get this wrong. Jesus isn't saying, you got to get it right every time. And that guy was 90% more likely to have a drug addiction than that guy. You have to make decisions in the moment. And you have to, as long as you're doing so with goodwill, I think you just have to accept it.
Yeah, to act with goodwill in accordance with reason. With the available facts that you have at your disposal.
And don't let yourself off too easy either. I mean, really, you can't. Somebody needs you.
Like
help.
in Maggie's case, if she's feeling moved by the Spirit to help out, then help out in a reasonable way.
Fair enough. Okay, I really found that very helpful. Maybe, I don't know. 888-318-7884 is the number. A whole bunch more calls. Hope they're as good as Maggie's. If you're on the line, try to make them as good as Maggie's. All right, we'll be right to you right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Catch Catholic Answers Live anytime at Catholic.com.
Jesus asked his disciples, "Who do you say that I am?" Turns out that today, as back then, this question has a lot of different answers. So many groups want to appropriate Jesus, tweaking his identity until he looks and sounds just like one of them. But then you no longer have the Lord, says apologist Trent Horn. You have an imposter. In his new groundbreaking book, Counterfeit Christ, Trent exposes 18 phony versions of Jesus that we encounter today, helping you to recognize the fakes when you see them, explain why they're phony, and make a case for the full truth and beauty of who Jesus is, the Christ, the Son of the living God. Order your copy of Counterfeit Christ today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Hi, this is Trent Horn. Did you know that you can have me and other Catholic Answers speakers headline your next conference or parish event? Go to CatholicAnswersSpeakers.com to get all the information you need to book one of our dynamic speakers today. That's CatholicAnswersSpeakers.com.
Love and beauty. As a little girl, Dawn Eden Goldstein knew that she wanted those things, that in them somehow she would find God. Over the years as a rock journalist, she moved among some of popular music's best-known artists, straining to capture that transcendent love and beauty in every note and lyric. In Sunday Will Never Be the Same, Dawn recounts her spiritual journey in beautifully wrought detail, mixing powerful accounts of trauma, healing, and epiphany with funny anecdotes from inside the music scene. It is the rare conversion story that delights as it inspires, amuses as it edifies, and ultimately lays before the reader a lived testimony to the transforming grace of Christ. Order your copy of Sunday Will Never Be the Same by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
I'm Gloria Purvis.
I'm Monsignor Charles Pope. And I'm Deacon Harold. The Morning Glory team faces up to the Face app.
Monday morning, 7 Eastern. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
That's the groovy music right there. Carlo doesn't even know what that is because he hasn't been on the Thursday before. He's like, I don't know why Sai's so happy, because every Thursday we used to play the groovy music.
I love groovy music.
And then Nick stopped playing the groovy music. And then a caller called yesterday and said, where's the groovy music? And look at that. Nick brought it out again.
I did I think the dance I would call, if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube Live, I call that the Chuck E. Cheese. So it's just like rapidly moving your arms like a Chuck E. Cheese animatronic. Though nowadays kids don't know what that is. You'd have to call it the Five Nights at Freddy's, just like, the
I don't know if I would
animatronics.
classify that as groovy.
Carlo, you're going to get emails. You be careful, because the groovy music is very popular. You be careful right now.
Groovy
Carlo Broussard
is like funk type stuff. That's groovy.
Well,
like
'cause
the
it's got a
music-
groove.
Like the music for the game show. I would classify that as groovy.
That is...
listen, Carlo Broussard, you should send him the emails that he has somehow insulted the sanctity of the
I would
groovy
say
music.
funk is a subset of groovy, but the kind of groovy we were listening to is more like, it's like mid-1960s groovy. Late 60s groovy. You're
Which
thinking
is
of more
exactly
like 70s.
what I am. I'm mid-1960s
Grand Funk
groovy.
Railroad.
I was born in the mid-1960s, so
You're groovy.
I have that groovy, baby.
Now I'm
Groovy.
thinking of Army of Darkness. Groovy, baby. Groovy.
Oh, I was thinking of Austin Powers.
Groovy, baby.
Yeah.
I still prefer Ash from Army of Darkness.
I like Carlo, though, the musician. Getting it. I don't know if I would classify that as groovy. That falls into you need a little more funk to it. You need a little more.
Although my music education is quite a bit limited.
Is it really? You're like a great musician. I have heard you musicize.
Yeah, but I'm just a Southern boy, man. I'm trapped in
you're,
Southern boy music.
You're humble. That's humbleness.
I'm
also
not
called
like
humility.
Trent, who can do a podcast on classical music.
My top 7 favorite pieces, if you're interested.
But anybody can do their top 7 favorite pieces of classical music because
it's subjective.
Those are the ones that you know.
Okay, what are your 7 favorite?
First, Celine Dion, when she sings that one from the boat movie. What's that?
My Heart Will Go On.
My Heart Will Go On. That's
We're thinking
great.
something more
That's
like
classical music, right?
Like Beethoven, Tchaikovsky.
Oh, Beethoven.
I'm willing to allow Wagner.
Okay. Well,
I like Wagner.
There's nothing that Tchaikovsky ever wrote that's bad. It's all good. because he's like a melody man, and I like melodies. Tchaikovsky is a genius of melody. I mean, just look at the ballets. It's like melody. It's like this is the greatest melody ever, and then another greatest melody ever follows it. It's like listening to Paul McCartney.
I don't know if it's the greatest melody. It is great. It's probably he's probably the greatest Russian composer of all time, at least I would say.
No, there's greater composers than Tchaikovsky. I'm just saying
I'm
he
talking
loves
about
melodies.
Russia.
He's just really good at.
He's great, absolutely.
Yeah, Rachmaninoff second. I would put that there. I
Okay.
love romantic Russian music. How you like this, Carlo? You didn't think I could talk it? Right.
Talk it, brother.
Also, I'd have to put Nessun Dorma up there. That's one of the greats. Also, Enfant du Temple Saint, the wonderful.
Ooh, you said that very well.
Thank you very much. That's Bizet, I think, from the Pearl Fishers. You want to keep going? No,
we're at 4. That suffices.
All right, John he's right here in Chula Vista, listening to EWTN channel 130 Sirius XM satellite radio. You are up next, John. Your question or comment, you're free. It's free form, so whatever you got.
Hi, gentlemen.
Hi, John.
Hi. So, I have a question about something that I read in Gaudium et it's in Veritatis Splendor, quoting Gaudium et Spes. So, Saint Pope John Paul II was listing intrinsic evils,
right?
And he lists among them deportation,
right?
And that's kind of been an issue here in our country recently. It's resurfaced as an issue in our country recently. And I'm wondering in what context he's talking about that, because I believe that Gaudium et Spes was written at towards the end of the Vatican Council.
It's one of the documents of the Second Vatican Council.
That's correct.
Right. But I think it was towards the end of it.
Okay.
But I just was wondering what the context was of including deportation in there, and how we apply that today.
Right. Actually, our colleague Jimmy Akin has a wonderful article on this called "Is Deportation Intrinsically Evil?" that you can see at Catholic Answers magazine online. But when we look at this in paragraph 27 of Gaudium et Spes, it talks about these intrinsic evils that are offensive to human dignity: arbitrary imprisonment, deportation, slavery, prostitution, and trafficking in women and children. The Latin word used here is deportatio, which can mean even, deporting. It means the same thing as in English, to deport someone. But I think you're right that context is key here. So this was written back in 1965 when issues like illegal immigration, like we're talking now, we're debating in the United States about deporting people who are unlawfully present in the United States, or people who are in the United States who did not go through the proper legal framework to attain either citizenship or permanent residency. And so they risk deportation under various circumstances. That was not debated as much, a worldwide debated issue in 1965. Really, the thing that was more a problem when you go back into the 1940s during World War II, you had cases of people who were seeking asylum from ethnic cleansing and genocide who were deported back to places like Nazi Germany, for example. And so I would say here that deportation of sending people either in one part of a country to another part to be exterminated, or back to a place where they face a grave threat like ethnic cleansing, is what falls under the status of deportation. It can't mean simply sending someone out of a country as part of a punishment, because even the Vatican itself reserves the right to do that. Jimmy notes in his article that the 1929 Lateran Pact that the Holy See has with Italy says that it will turn over criminals to Italy who are within the Vatican, within the Holy See, for extradition. So if you said all deportation is intrinsically evil, then if I murder somebody and I get to Canada, you say, well, you can't deport him back to the United States for trial. Like if I kill Cy, I got it in. I got one in there. I got one in there within the context.
No, Carlo doesn't know what you're talking about, but he kills me off a lot in his examples.
I do kill you off a lot. So if deportation were wrong, then if I killed Cy and went to Canada, then that would mean the Canadian government couldn't send me back to the United States for trial, which seems absurd for extradition. So clearly it cannot mean sending someone, removing them from one country to another is always wrong. That just can't be the case. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's better.
Sure. Okay. All right.
All right.
John, we got another John coming up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we can read it in harmony with what the Catechism states, and Jimmy also points this out in his article in paragraph 2241, that political authorities, for the sake of the common good for which they are responsible, may make the exercise of the right to immigrate subject to various juridical conditions, especially with regard to the immigrant's duties toward their country of adoption. So what Jimmy's pointing out is that we have to read what the Vatican Council says in light of the historical context, in light of harmony with other teachings of the church, and then come to the conclusion that naturally what Gaudium et Spes was referring to was condemning, mass ethnic cleansing type deportations, similar to what was happening in World War II.
Do you see how Carlo can answer a question about morals without killing me? Do you see how that he didn't mention me? He didn't kill me?
But my example will really stick with people now.
That indeed it will.
It will stick with me. We got another John. Thank you very much, John. Number one. John number two is in Seattle, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Thanks for downloading the app onto your phone. John, your question or comment?
Yeah, my question is, the Catholic Church permits an evolutionary worldview. So how would they explain why God would create a world with death and disease before humans were on Earth and committed any sin?
Okay, I got to say something before I let Carlo answer. But so the Catholic Church allows you to hold evolutionary theory. The question is, and then why does God allow the world to be so full of death and sin? Why did he make the world that way? Just a quick tip for anybody who is interested in that question, because it's probably like a billion people. Carlo just finished a fantastic series of focus episodes for us, 3 of them in a row, on evolutionary theory and God's existence. It's about why evolution doesn't eliminate God. I realize it's slightly different than the question that you're asking, but it's well worth listening to. The first one is up right now at Catholic Answers Focus. The next 2 will be over the next 2 weeks. If you haven't listened to Catholic Answers Focus, Carlo is the guy to start with. You will not be sorry about the content that you get. So head over to Catholic Answers Focus and grab that one that's already out, and then wait the next 2 weeks. Over the next 2 Wednesdays, the next 2 will be out. Okay, Carlos, so the question, you are permitted, first of all, he's correct. As a Catholic,
Correct.
You are permitted to accept the theory of evolution, or any
Right.
theory of evolution,
Right.
yeah.
Well, my first thought, John, is that it coheres and is consistent with God from a philosophical perspective and willing to create a material world. Inasmuch as he wills to create a material world and boring a perpetual miracle, you're going to have generation and corruption, where the good thing of the flourishing of one thing is going to curtail the flourishing of another. That's just simply part and parcel of a material world with material beings. Things come into existence, they go out of existence. And even the Catechism hints at this in paragraph 310, where it's asking the question, why did God not create a world so perfect that no evil could exist in it? God has infinite power. He could have created such a world and performed a perpetual miracle to stop material beings from corrupting and going out of existence and dying, etc. But in his infinite wisdom, he willed not to do that. Aquinas has some principles in his writings that I think shed light upon that the inferior can be sacrificed for the superior, for the good of the whole of the universe. Is one principle in Aquinas' writings that sheds light on that. But the Catechism recognizes that, even prior to the fall, that God created the world in what it calls a state of journeying towards its ultimate perfection, where things come into being and go out of a being. So the Catechism is recognizing that things come and go. There's death, right? There's generation, there's corruption, even before the fall, and that God in his infinite wisdom willed to create the world in this state of journeying towards its ultimate perfection. So philosophically, it's consistent in that God willed to have a material world with material things, and he can order the death of those material things to a greater good and the good of the whole. Now, when it comes to human beings, the Catechism points out in the surrounding paragraphs that when it comes to human beings, God had willed, on condition that Adam and Eve did not sin, that Adam and Eve, as well as their descendants, would not experience suffering and death had they remained in divine intimacy, that God would have performed a perpetual miracle to preserve human beings from suffering and dying. But because they forfeited that gift due to their disobedience, that death entered into human history. So those are a few thoughts that I would share with you, John, in order to try to contextualize this and to show that death within the material world, even prior to the fall of Adam and Eve, is consistent with our understanding of God as the creator of all things.
John? John, is
Okay,
that...
thank you.
Oh,
Appreciate
okay.
it.
All right, very good. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back with more with Carlo and Trent right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
This is Bishop Chad Zielinski from the Diocese of Fairbanks of Northern Alaska, and you are listening to Catholic Answers Live.
A lot of people think that street evangelization involves yelling out of a bullhorn telling people that they're going to hell. Not so with St. Paul's Street Evangelization. Our methods are non-confrontational and effective. We simply offer information on the Catholic faith along with rosaries, miraculous medals, and prayer. Pope Francis wrote about how beautiful it is to see street preachers joyfully bringing Jesus to every corner of the earth. Street evangelization is fun and fruitful. Join us today at streetevangelization.com.
I'm Jeanette DeMello, Editor-in-Chief of the National Catholic Register and co-host of Register Radio with Matthew Bunson. Join us every week as we talk with the Register's expert writers and editors about the news you need to know and offer authentic Catholic insights on the important stories that impact your life. Register Radio, every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern and Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern, here on EWTN Global Catholic Radio.
Basically, the Friday panel shows are just for me. I get to talk to people I really like talking to, really smart people about stuff that I want to talk about. But lots of callers today with questions and things they'd like to discuss, and we welcome that. 888-318-7884, the number. I still have some news stories I want to get to before the end, but I want to get to these callers if I can, just to be fair to everybody. So let's go to Donna in Tahoe. We didn't have something else we had to wrap up. I'm not forgetting something, right?
No,
we're
think
good.
so.
Okay. Sorry. Little brain cramp there for a second. Donna. Hi, Donna. Your question or comment?
Hi, Cy. How are you?
Oh, this is our good friend Donna who comes to the conference every year. Will we be seeing you this year, September 26th through 29th?
I will be there.
All right. And
I will be there to see you and see everyone.
I recognize your voice, and Donna also comes in the day before the conference usually, and
I do.
And you usually say something into the microphone for us.
Yes, I will be there too to visit y'all and to say whatever it is that I need to say online,
Well,
which will be fun.
Well, it's nice to have you with us today, Donna. What was the comment or question that you had?
Well, the thing that I wanted to say was, when it comes to giving to the poor, I think a lot of Catholics, when we go to Mass on Sunday and we give for the first collection, that is our giving. And I think a lot of Catholics feel guilty when we don't give to the second collection, or when we're out driving around and we see, people, asking for money. Mm-hmm. I think Catholics need to understand that when we go to Mass and we give in that first collection, we are giving to the poor, and it's up to the Catholic Church. We trust the Catholic Church to do with that money what's needed for the poor, and that's what I needed. That's what I needed to say.
All right, let's let Carlo and Trent address that. But I just want to get something clear. So you're saying that if there's a second collection, don't give to the second collection. You just want to give to the first collection.
I think you're saying not to feel bad if you don't.
Oh, okay.
Not necessarily don't give, but I'll let Donna.
Donna?
Guilted into giving to that second collection.
Oh, okay. Okay. I got you.
Yeah, I think Donna's on the right track here, that it is reasonable and morally permissible to trust. It's morally good to trust, not just permissible, but good to trust the Church in using the funds as the church sees fit to serve the poor. But then there's also a question of too, given those collections, which collection goes to sort of church support, and then if there's a distinct separate collection or whatever, or a fund that would go specifically to serving the poor. So we would also have to inquire about that. Are my funds just a general fund that the church can use to support the poor, or is it a fund that's going to be only to maintain the church and do church activities, and then a separate fund for serving the poor? So you would have to just simply inquire about that. But if it is just a general fund and the church is going to use these funds and use it to serve the poor, then yes, you would be contributing to serving the poor and thus meeting your moral obligation.
But I think also we have to, and you should probably inquire with your pastor about and ask for a copy of the church's financial records to show how weekly collections, what the church's budget is and how it's distributed. But I believe that the weekly collection goes primarily towards the upkeep and the maintenance of the facilities and paying the staff and salary of those who serve at the parish. And then a portion of it goes to the diocese itself. And the diocese can use that for a variety of different programs that help people and provide for all different kinds of corporal works of mercy, whether it's feeding the hungry, providing for those who are prison ministries, education. So there, you'll have to look and see if we're obligated to help the church. I guess it's kind of the unofficial 6th precept of the church. If you look in paragraph 2043 of the Catechism, it says the faithful also have the duty of providing for the material needs of the church, each according to his abilities. So we need to provide for the church so we can have a place to worship God and celebrate the sacraments. But also, I do think that we should pray and discern and see the importance of also using what God has blessed us in ways that may be more directly focused on helping the poor. And the church provides us with those opportunities. That doesn't mean you should feel like you've got some kind of liturgical gun to your head to give to every second collection. But you should pray and say, well, is this specific need, whether it's for retired clergy or whether it's for missions work or whatever it may be, there is a difference between collections that are focused on a particular need and those that generally help the church's mission. And I think we have a responsibility to discern that.
When you talk about, a lot of people don't know about the diocesan tax, and it is important the diocesan tax is very important because lots of really good things are done at the diocesan level. Like most parishes don't have a prison outreach, but the diocese will have an organized prison outreach, that kind of thing. Yeah. But often the second collection is an untaxed collection. So if it says this is the collection for St. Vincent de Paul, the diocese is not taking part of that collection. It's going all to St. Vincent de Paul. So I don't know if everybody knows that, but it's something to consider in your giving as well. Does that address your concerns, Donna?
It does. It absolutely does. And I love you guys so much, and I can't wait to see you guys in September. It's going to be so much fun.
Did you know that?
God bless you all.
Did you know they're making me into a cookie?
I think they're making cookies.
I think I like the cookie better than the M&M. I'm sorry, Jimmy. I'm sorry.
No, objectively speaking, cookies are better than M&Ms. Cookies are the best.
If you look on Facebook
I believe
Live,
that's in the Bible. Cookies are the best food. So
that's second hesitations 3-4. The cookie, it kind of looks like you. It sort of looks like a logo we would put on well, it does. The printout looks like you. I've seen the actual cookie though.
You've seen the cookie?
I have seen the cookie. It looks like a logo you would put on. I'm pretty sure it's the real cookie.
No,
I've seen the cookie.
No, that's a sample cookie.
But it's a real cookie.
It's an actual cookie, but it's not. They didn't print me on it. And I just want to make clear.
Oh, is that not you? Because it looked like a refrigerator salesman.
No, that was a refrigerator.
Like a vacuum cleaner repairman.
Well, I don't know what a vacuum cleaner repairman looks like.
Man, I don't know.
No, those were sample cookies, and I want to stress something.
This doesn't look like Psy at all.
No, because that wasn't like me. But I just want to stress something. Like I feel like I have a really big head about the fact that I'm getting made into a cookie. I was just the last choice. Like there are other people in the building refused to be made into a cookie. So I just want to make it clear that I'm not so special that they made me into a cookie. It was just they were like, who'll do it? And they got to me, and I agreed to do it. Another caller on the line, Donna. Thanks very, very much. Do we have another? Oh no, it was a story I wanted to share with you. There were these 3 kids. Did you see this? It became viral in a good way. Mm-hmm. These 3 kids in Canada, and they were going to Tim Hortons. It was kind of the middle of the night.
For those of you who don't know, Tim Hortons is a glorified Dunkin' Donuts.
No, Tim Hortons is Tim Hortons, which is the greatest donut chain in Canada. Right. We don't have to compare it to Dunkin' Donuts.
Because when I went to Canada, they said you got to go to Tim Hortons, and I was like, this is a Dunkin' Donuts. But anywho,
it's Canadian Dunkin' Donuts.
Oh, so it's just
Tim Hortons.
It's just really polite Dunkin' Donuts.
Okay, so these.
And speaking of polite,
yeah. Okay, so these three Canadian youths, they're driving in their car on their way out to get some Tim Hortons, and it's nighttime. It's like 10 at night, and they see a woman on the side of the road, and her car is not working. And these three, they pull over, and they just they don't think this is a good place to leave this woman or anything. They're just good young Canadian fellers, and they push the woman's car.
Wow.
All the way home. 4 miles.
It says here they pushed it 7 kilometers.
Which is like 4 miles. But they don't have miles in Canada. People in Canada don't know what a mile is. So yeah, they went 7 kilometers.
7 kilometers, yes.
7 kilometers. They got back to their own car at 4:30 in the morning. I'm assuming they called their mom and dad about this. But I just wanted to end on a good news story.
There's still good people out there you can count on, at least in Canada.
No, there's good people everywhere. There's good people. That would happen in most countries. Maybe not. I don't know.
I wonder about the lady, what was racing through her mind when she saw 3 guys pulling up on the side of the road and then being relieved to know that these 3 guys were good guys.
Yeah, exactly right, because it's a dark road at night.
Yeah, that must have been quite an emotional roller coaster.
It's good to hear stories like this, because with most news is if it bleeds, it leads. And so, for example, a lot of people think that crime has risen over the past 20 or 30 years, when actually it's at historic lows. It's just the problem. We have a 24-hour news cycle. They got to fill it with stuff, and nobody wants to read or hear about just nice news stories that are like geopolitics all around the world. We want sensational stuff because it leads, but then that gives us a skewed understanding of reality.
Right, that's actually true. The news, if you watch the news every night, you're not more in contact with reality, you're less in contact with reality. You got to be really careful about that.
Because it's not news, it's just the things that sell.
But I want to ask you this.
There's a philosophical principle there, because evil is the privation of do good.
They find ways to fill the news cycle with
a lot of privations.
With a lot of privations. They find
There's a lack of being. Okay, but what do you call a person who stops at the side of the road and helps another person?
Good Samaritan, right?
That's what I thought. You call that person a Good Samaritan. But in all the news reports, nobody called these kids Good Samaritans. So I had to take something negative out of something good. I think our society is losing contact with these basic biblical references. Or we just have secular references. We don't have, like, for most of the last 2,000 years, somebody stops on the side of the road and helps someone, you'd say, that's a real Good Samaritan. And I didn't see the words Good Samaritan anywhere.
Yeah, I guess, what do they come with nowadays? He's a stand-up guy.
Yeah, they said these are good kids and their parents should be proud of them. And they are. They're good kids that their parents should be proud of. But
how about that, Si?
How about it?
How about this story?
Okay, so I want to just say Carlo insulted the groovy music, and Trent insulted Tim Hortons. Send them the emails. I don't want to see the emails. Trent Horn, the author of many things, including most recently a book called Counterfeit Christ. You should get that book. It's really good, particularly the one on Che Guevara. But also, he's the proprietor of the podcast Council of Trent. You can find that at TrentHornPodcast.com. Did I get that all right?
That is correct.
Thank you very much, Trent Horn.
Glad to be here.
Carla Broussard is the author of Prepare the Way, Overcoming Obstacles to God, the Gospel, and the Church. And you can find him at Catholic.com. Right, Carlo?
Yes, sir.
Jesus Christ is the light of the nations. You know it's true. And we'll see you next time on Catholic Answers Live.